Hello, everybody. Welcome to the July 2nd edition of the OpenCrowbar Community Planning Meeting. A lot happened this sprint, so let's dive in and start talking about some of the accomplishments and things like that. And we've got a pretty full agenda already. If people want to follow along and help me take notes, I would love it.
Happy to.
Right. Thank you. Victor, do you want to start with the IPMI pieces? There's still some polls outstanding, but it'd be worth going through that.
Well, as of the latest polls that I have up for IPMI, OpenCrowbar will automatically assume direct control of any IPMI controllers on nodes that it discovers. And we can use them to power machines on, power them off, identify them, reboot them, blink them, force them to pixie boot, all that sort of goodness.
You want to talk about the external power CLI and the node discovery, the power down after discovery?
Oh yeah. One of the things has that code actually been merged yet, or are you still looking at it?
No, it's outstanding. It's there. I'll pull it up. I wanted to test it against physical gear first. But.
Okay. So one of the polls that I have outstanding is to allow the Crowbar core to turn nodes off when they're not doing anything interesting. Like if you just discover a whole swarm of nodes and Crowbar detects that there's nothing else to do with them at the time, it will turn them off if it detects that it has a method of turning them back on. Ditto for OS installation. If the node has the ability to be turned on remotely, if we install the OS and there's nothing else to do, once the OS is up and running and we boot it into it and everything's gone green, it'll just turn that node off until we commit new roles on that node.
So, Victor, is that a flag to enable or disable that feature?
Right now, it's just enabled by default.
Okay.
It's
you can
pretty
shut
much
it
the
off?
same. Well, no, it's just on that thing is just on. If that pull request gets merged as it is, that's just the way Crowbar will work. There won't be an option to turn that functionality off.
Is that an option?
Although
Huh?
there is a way to turn it off if you add downstream work. Like if you pick the OS you want to install, then it won't do that. It only does it if it has no other work pending.
Well, I mean, the logic that I'm using is if you just plug in a rack worth of nodes and you turn them on you turn them on to get them discovered, but you don't have anything else to do at the time, the nodes aren't just going to sit there wasting power. Crowbar will turn them off until you have something for them to do.
Right. So,
Yeah.
Scott, you're thinking...
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask Scott if he thinks that should be a controllable setting.
I believe that it should, because it's a global action of the system, right? As a user, you may or may not want that to occur, right? You might want those systems on just because you haven't finished configuring things that you want to configure. You don't want to go through the boot cycle. Some of these systems take a while to actually power on. So I would suggest that either in this poll or in a future poll that we make it an option where you can globally turn that function on or off.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, my goal there was to be able to save power without users having to really worry about it that much. And it also kind of that's pretty much equivalent functionality to what is in Ironic right now.
Mm-hmm. I like it as a default. It might be nice to turn it off because sometimes when you're first bringing up the machines, you're not sure that you have all the power and cooling in place and you want to bring them up. Other times you actually want to test power loading on your PDUs. So there's a case where you might want to bring all the machines on before they're deployed.
Well, and with the way that it's set up, if you put the machines into debug mode, they're just going to stay on. Or if you have other work for them to do that Crowbar knows about, it's not going to turn them off if it detects that there's something to do.
Mm-hmm.
How do you put them in debug mode? I vaguely remember.
Crowbar, nodes, whatever, debug. It pretty much just tells it to pixie boot into Sledgehammer, and then just sit there forever until you do something.
What we want to do is actually we need to document the debug mode.
Debug mode's been documented for a while, dude.
I think you're right.
I had a debug mode months ago.
I know. I remember you adding it. I'm trying to remember where to find it in the document. So there's a place in the docs, in the deployment guide for troubleshooting, that it would be useful to add this as an item, because I think it's only in the dev guide. It's a really useful state.
Probably. It might only be in the dev guide, but yeah. I mean, debug mode's been in there for quite some time.
No. I remember you documenting it. This is what my thought was that it should go into the troubleshooting tips, because people would want to know. All right.
Wouldn't it kind of also make sense to surface this behavior as a role towards the end of discovery?
No.
That way,
No, it wouldn't.
No.
Interesting question.
No, in general, I don't want power actions like that to be surfaced as roles, because it I would be forced to add even more special casing to how we walk the node role graph.
Okay.
What if we had a role for we've always talked about this, like a diagnostic mode or a power test mode or a system check, right? That would be a different type of thing. You'd actually be running a self-test. Right. That would sort of solve this problem, wouldn't it?
If you want to boot the system into self-test, we can add that. The reason I don't want power actions by themselves to be roles is that they're kind of independent. I mean, Crowbar, despite the fact that since we're managing IPMI, we can control the power state of the node. We're not the only things that control the power state of the node. Dudes walking through data centers pushing power buttons control the power state of the node, and and that's something that's just fundamentally out of band for Crowbar. So I don't want to model that as a node role, which is fundamentally an in-band sort of action.
No, I don't think. I think people are just trying to get their heads around how this works and what the implications are, and think through some use cases. We've never. Yeah, go ahead.
If you look down, I'm taking the same notes at the bottom of the page.
Oh, you are? Darn it. Thank you.
You're talking. I'll type.
Yay! I love it. I think we're trying to get our head around some new capability and figure out the right way it fits, and I don't know. I'm excited about it. This is cool. So one of the things that we might want to do for the design agenda is actually talk through some implications for this. Okay. Because I think that this opens up some interesting possibilities that we should talk through.
Yeah, I mean, and just with IPMI 2.0 at least, we could go a lot further into power management. Like we could put power caps on servers that's supported and expose it via IPMI. That functionality is baked into the IPMI 2.0 specification, but probably not going to go there for a while.
We should. Those things are definitely should be user and community driven implementation choices, right?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Keeping an eye on time. what I'm going to suggest is we spend some time. We have the design components that we were starting to discuss in next week's meeting as part of the design meeting. Trying to think if we had. Yike! Not what I meant to do. Sorry. Okay. And then, so the other thing that dropped this time was the initial Ready State Wizard. I'm still debugging that. I believe I'm still working that through as we've gotten far enough. But the Ready State Wizard actually will let you complete the tasks that we had, and I took people's feedback from the middle of the week. So that hopefully in the next cycle we'll make that an official part of the UI.
Can we view it here?
Let me see where if I have a system that's ready to show it. I think I might. No, I might not. I shut all my systems down. Hold on, I have a screenshot of it in the pull request. So this is what it looks like. So it didn't really change much from what people saw before, but it doesn't include the admin node now, and you actually can pick the operating system that you want, and then when you click Run Wizard, it takes you into the pilot, or whatever name you give it, into the pilot deployment, and then you still have to commit. You still have to press commit, so it has an expectation that you're going to review the final item. The bug I have in it is that it seems like it's adding node roles into the deployment that it shouldn't add. So I need to see what happens. And then Victor, I need to validate if I caused this or it was the IPMI power state, but I'm not currently automatic. The system is not shutting down VMs automatically. If I tell it to install an OS. So I'm isolating that. I'll let you know if I actually have a problem.
What do you mean the system is not shutting down VMs automatically?
So when I create a deployment and assign it into the Crowbar installed OS role, normally when I commit that deployment, it shuts down the VM and then restarts it and installs the OS. It was not doing that. It wasn't doing that after I used the Ready State Wizard. I haven't gone back and rebaselined. Okay. So I was planning to rebaseline, but I'll give you a heads up because I know you changed some of those paths. Oh, actually, here's a question relevant to the IPMI work. So the IPMI introduced this out-of-band capability to turn machines on and off. And I thought the code also did it for VMs just by doing the conventional SSH and shutdown. If you ask for an
we never turn, well, with SSH, we never turn nodes off. We just expose the capability to reboot them.
Okay.
Yeah, because, I mean, with just the SSH, we have no way of turning the node back on, so I didn't expose turning it off via SSH.
Okay. That's something we can add to the design meeting.
I mean, for any other, like, out-of-band power management type things, I don't want, even if, like, the out-of-band thing is just SSHing into a node and saying halt, I don't want to do that without being able to undo it via the same control paths. And, you know, turning a machine off is kind of one way unless you've got some out-of-band way of turning it back on.
That makes perfect sense. And actually, from that perspective, somebody was talking about Nathan was talking about this, a VM API. Actually, it's not. It's a cloud API jig. All right. Okay, so we should talk about that.
So a couple things on the wizard one, Rob.
Sure.
Can you state what the use case of this screen's for?
So this screen brings together 5 different actions that we were performing over and over again. And so the idea is it really simplifies people's first experience with Crowbar. That's the use case, and actually I think that's in the, I think I actually put it in the story. But the use case is, as an operator, I want to bring up nodes and install an operating system without having to learn 6 different screens.
Okay.
Right. Because that's, in this case, normally what you'd have to do is you'd have to create a deployment, you'd have to create a network, you'd have to edit the range information, you'd have to then go to the bulk deployment screen to put the nodes in the right deployment, and then on each node you'd have to click in to the available OS role and set the operating system. So this one screen takes the place of, about 20, since there's 5 nodes in here, at least 20 clicks through the Crowbar system.
Okay, I think I have that. Another question: should we be adding in additional information about the systems on the screen so the user can make an informed decision of which operating systems they want deployed on which systems?
I would be happy to take suggestions for that. Yes. And if you click on the node, it's going to drill you into the node details. So it's a question of knowing what information you need. Probably an inventory, some type of inventory data, since we have it, would be useful.
Disk memory, CPU, and asset tag, if it exists, would be the first things that I would think.
Cool. Add that into the notes, and those are all easy things to add to the screen. There's certainly enough real estate to do that.
Maybe disks?
Yeah, that's what I said. Disk mem proc. So I'm adding them to the notes. And asset tag.
Love it.
And
that's actually really easy to add.
Switch information in future.
Yeah.
The other question that I put down, and people please break in so it's not just me talking to Rob, is when we have RAID and BIOS functionality into the system, would you expect those to be settable options in the screen as well?
Totally. Yeah, I expect this to evolve.
For me, it would be useful if I was deploying to see the version of the BIOS, etc., all in a column to say, hey, these 3 machines are down revs. I need to update them.
Okay.
If there's real estate for it.
What we could conceivably do is just start throwing flags in there. About, you know, if so some of the information that you're looking for could actually be badged out. So you could actually have, you know, a BIOS alert or something like that, and then you could hover to get the additional detail. So there's ways we can make the real estate really compact, is what I'm trying to summarize.
Yes, the issue I'm trying to address is either one of two. Either I have a newer BIOS for them if they're Dell machines, or I have a mismatch in BIOS and they're the exact same machine otherwise. So I have 12 720s sitting there waiting to go, and it goes, hey, wait a minute, 3 of these are older. That's what I'm trying to capture.
Makes perfect sense. We have a screen in Crowbar 1 that we've been planning to port over, which I usually call the Sesame Street screen. It's the one of these things is not like the others screen that does some grouping, some family groups as we called it. So would you want to see that more from this screen, or would a dedicated screen be helpful for that?
My issue is if I'm doing a normal install, I would like it if the system were able to be smart enough to tell me, hey, I got issues here. Otherwise, I'd rather it be silent. That's my preference. And then there's some other screen that I go to say if I'm interested in it.
Love it. Makes sense to me too. This is exactly the feedback that we do these reviews for. Thank you.
So another question on this. because this is kind of an intermediary screen, you know, if you actually had a workload that you wanted to deploy that the OCB actually supported, you wouldn't necessarily go through this screen, I believe. Or is that not the case, right? Would you expect people to go through this screen and then deploy the workload, or just skip right to the final state that you want these systems to be in and have it default through the through like an operating system choice and that sort of stuff?
What I'm hoping is the workloads will have their own variants of this wizard that tunes for them. Because if I'm doing, say, a Hadoop cluster, the RAID and BIOS configurations are going to be, I don't need to expose them because they're much more set based on that. So this was sort of the least common denominator wizard, and I was, So you're asking, would you then have a secondary screen, and could the wizard be expanded to then take you to another step before deployment?
I was just wondering what the flow would be. All right, it could be a number of different options. I think either of them are fine. But I think that once we have some workload deployment functionality in the system, you need to be clear in both the documentation and the UI flow which one it is that you should do, or you should do one then the other.
Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit at the design meeting. If you want, I'll ask that we postpone it because it's future.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a great question. Cool. And then the other thing that we said we were going to do this, and it sort of came in for free, is the Travis CI, at least working on a no-op basis. And then during the design meeting, we talked through some of the options on how to handle that. I haven't had time to make any progress.
If we're tripping to the Travis CI, does it make sense to bring up the email on the list that I put out?
Sure.
Review it here, since there wasn't really any comments online.
So let's do this. Let's finish. Let's talk about the docs. We had two things that didn't get feedback: the docs publishing to HTML that Mike has in here, and Travis CI. Why don't we do the Travis CI, and then we'll talk about the docs, and then we'll move on to the other planning items. Cool, because we're right at halfway. Go ahead, Scott. I'll take notes while you go.
Well, since you have the share, could you just kick up the post that I did?
Let's see. Somewhere in here is OpenCrowbar. Where's Crowbar?
Pull request process. Down, 3 more.
Okay.
Wrong one.
3 more?
Yeah.
Darn it.
That one.
Got it.
Okay. There's the diagram. All right, cool. So at the last meeting, we said that that what we wanted to do is document how the process flow would work with the Travis CI. So this is a fairly simple proposal, but I thought that a picture would also help with it. I also defined what the Travis CI system will do at this point in time, and what we would potentially have an integration system do later. So just in essence, quickly reviewing the two of them. So the Travis CI system is effectively a gating system that does a really quick smoke test to ensure that that the BDD test sequences pass on a virtual environment. It has a series of limitations, namely the operating system and what you're doing in those pieces. So I tried to outline those in this email. It's clear that we are going to need a further testing system, probably on physical gear, where we can actually test multiple operating systems, because it's one of the value propositions of the system, which we can't do with Travis, or at least the online Travis. So that's a future, sure to be named later type of function. Does that all make sense, guys? All right, as usual, I'll take silence as any
No,
answer that I
no,
want. So,
I like your diagram, Scott, and I'm just wondering what the review process itself will actually consist of.
So we expect that the developer who's pushing in the new code or new feature will test their stuff on their own local repo and run it through Travis. Travis will determine whether it successfully builds and successfully makes the BDD tests run through appropriately. At that time, a reviewer, so a different engineer, will review the code and do a code analysis. Through that, we'll leave it up to the reviewer whether they believe that they need to run additional smoke tests or just do a code inspection. At the point that they're okay with what it is, they'll actually pull it into master. And that's kind of it, really short and sweet and simple. We'll leave it up to the discretion of the reviewer at this point in time whether they need to actually test everything out on a branch and make sure that it's okay.
Got it.
Does that make sense? At the when we build the integration system that'll do some more in-depth tests, we very well may make that another system gate, but I expect that test to take much longer. Somewhere in the order of 45 minutes to an hour, especially if we're dealing with real hardware. So we don't necessarily want to put that in the middle of the development stream. You want to use it as we have a broken build type of environment.
Now you're really looking for two votes before accepting the patch into the master repo, right?
Absolutely. One's by Travis and one's by a code inspection and testing if necessary.
Okay.
Right. So +1, then +2, and then it can go into master at this point in time.
And then it's not, Travis will actually retest after the merge, also, which I'm not sure is a required part of this process, but we definitely want to make sure.
I believe that's necessary.
Well, I think the integration test here is part of that. Scott, where do you expect? At some point, RPMs are produced, right? And that's another topic for us to talk about today.
I think that requires its own process, Rob.
I think it does. I was just asking where in this process the RPMs are produced. I guess they're.
I think that's part of the to be named integration test function. I didn't want to go into design for that because it was so future. I thought it would take more discussion, but it's conceivable that the integration test would actually test the final installation mechanism and run through the installation as well as physical boot processes and all of the other things that aren't tested by the BDD infrastructure. Got it.
So one of the things that's I don't know if we need to highlight it in the flow or not, but the sort of top row is all code-based checks. They're testing the actual raw code and checked out from Git, whereas the integration suite is using the build, sort of the RPM build distribution bits, which is I think we need to test both. And that's been an Achilles heel in the past. That a lot of this whole process leading up to merge is actually against really dev systems and dev bits, not against production bits. So future integration test is going to be important by the time we get to Broom.
Yeah, the other thing that we found that was an Achilles heel that I touched on briefly is interactions between multiple operating systems. Where everything works fine on Ubuntu, but we break Cent or break SUSE. And if we're going to continue to support multiple operating systems, we need to test infrastructure that's going to test on multiple operating systems.
Well, bear in mind Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just going to say rather than, just assuming that you're going to catch that via code inspection because, you're not.
Those incompatibilities can even be manifest between RHEL 6 and RHEL 7 because of the significance of the size of the jump between those releases.
We get them between 6.4 and 6.5, John.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was evaluating test systems, I really tried to find one that would be able to test on multiple operating systems, and I wasn't able to find one that had the level of integration that Travis did. So I kind of took my recommendation was take the least common denominator. At least we'll have an automated voting mechanism, and we can make it smarter going forward.
Conceivably, we could use Docker to create different environments, at least test an Ubuntu or a CentOS or things like that. Right now we're using Docker to minimize the number of different environments we are trying to support. But in the future we could use it to test more broadly.
Yeah, we could enhance what Travis can do.
On that score, Rob, do we have any evidence to say that the work done in a Docker container actually carries across to the physical implementation of the OS? Have we discovered any issues there?
That's a great question. As far as I know, the install that we're doing inside of the Cent Docker container should work fine on a regular Cent install. Victor is probably better able to talk about that. The thing I would add is the RPM process is, we've tried to keep it closed. Victor, do you want to talk about that rather than me bumbling through it?
About the RPM process?
About the expectation of that if the Docker dev process works, that it'll translate into a more generalized Cent install using the RPMs.
Kind of. I mean, the main reason that we use Cent inside of the Docker process right now is because its init system is so stupid that it works properly inside of Docker. And anything more modern, their init systems, systemd and upstart, are too smart to operate properly inside of Docker whenever we're not strictly following Docker's one app per container model because we're running it as a dev environment. Yeah, and that's pretty much the entire reason we're still using Cent inside of Docker, not OpenSUSE or Ubuntu or RHEL 7 or something else.
So we'd have to give up a Docker container as a dev environment, or have a much more complex environment.
Well, that's not necessarily true. I mean, I also have the KVM admin script that right now it's specialized also to be Cent only, but it will stand up an admin node as a KVM virtual machine.
Okay.
And it does that by locally generating, or it does that by having you locally generate an RPM repository and installing out of that.
Oh.
Yeah.
That
right
sounds
now, that's
like a good thing to smoke test.
Yeah. Right now, right now that's not operating for reasons that I don't really, for unrelated reasons that I don't really want to get into right now. You saw one of the pull requests that I pushed out to try to fix it, but I haven't gone any farther in trying to get that working again. So.
Cool.
But
that'll address our next topic.
Yeah, that process could very easily be modified to be able to stand up an admin node on any Linux distro and test that. I don't use it mainly because the Docker process is much faster, and frankly, I'm not at the stage where I really care about what operating system the admin node is running on, because we have multi-OS capabilities, and it doesn't matter what OS the admin node is running on because it can install any other Linux distro.
Right. We made the decision to focus on 10.6.5 for now for this release cycle, because that's sufficient from a deployment perspective for the admin node.
Yeah.
Right. I'm jumping back. So this looks good. Scott, I think you got a little bit of feedback, but I think this is worth getting documented as in the actual doc subsystem.
What seems to be missing here is perhaps another fork point where we test different workloads. Did I miss a conversation about that, where we fork off to test, ingesting upstream cookbooks or some kind of supplied cookbooks and testing environments?
That's a great question.
And we're expecting those to not be contained in the BDD test suite?
Right.
They could be. They'd be additive to the BDD. You're almost, those tests, Judd, would have to come from their own, the workload repos. They'd have their own Travis. I mean, it's easy to add. But
Would we want them to, yeah, like how narrow is our scope here? That's just my question.
Yeah, I think as far as this process goes, Judd, I think it is as narrow as whatever the BDD test suite does, right? So the smarter the BDD test suite is, the more coverage you get. The less, the less time that people spend writing the tests when they implement new features, the less coverage you'll get via Travis. Right, and we should assume that if you're writing a feature, you're writing tests for that feature as part of the deliverable.
But in the core repository, it doesn't have knowledge of any workloads, so it can't do workload tests. The BDD was designed so that you could add workload-specific tests inside that workload, and then that would become additive to the test. But I think it's actually a different Travis process. It's the same general process, but it'd be a different Travis configuration file to test the workload. Interesting. This is actually a bigger question. It's a good one. Because if you were going to actually have a smoke test that included OpenStack or a Travis test that included the OpenStack configuration, we couldn't actually install it. All you'd be doing from a BDD perspective would be validating that the relationships and the roles worked, and if you extended Crowbar's APIs, those would be tested. It would be useful to test, but it wouldn't go very far down the I actually installed OpenStack route, because you really have to bring up the system to have a reasonable smoke test, a reasonable load test.
Well, I know our friends at SUSE are using Travis on V1.
Yeah. Oh no, Travis standalone can go really far doing this, and you can use it to kick off an integration test and run the KVM admin that Victor was talking about, and get results and actually do a full OpenStack or Hadoop install or whatever we want to do. I don't think the online version can do that.
I didn't realize any differences between the two of them, but I think the main difference with the online one is that it's hosted.
Well, and it's going to just spin up a VM or a container to run the test sequence, give you the entry points, and come back. Right? We'd actually have to spin up a multi-node system. We might get to a point with Docker that we could actually spin up a multi-Docker system and deploy OpenStack against that, and then we could do a real smoke test. Travis CI people's heads are going to explode at that point, but that would be fine. Be an interesting conversation to have.
All right. Well, if it doesn't invalidate this particular flow, then I'd just postpone it until we're ready to work on one of those workloads.
Yeah, no, I think that's right.
If it invalidates this flow, then we can relook at it, but I don't think that it sounds like it does.
So I have another question, maybe, I don't know if it's critical or not. Would we require this step, or is this a suggested step? And I'll show you what I mean.
As far as I'm concerned, it's required, but...
let's see. Somewhere in my commit history, it actually shows me so when I'm looking at my work with, it will actually tell me that Travis tested stuff when I look at my commit history. I don't know where. Somewhere in here. But I was just looking at this. It actually was it was actually saying Travis had tested, because I have Travis turned on for my my personal repo, like it's showing. It actually has it, and it tells me that Travis validated the different commits that I had. But if people haven't seen it, I can show you what it looks like. In this case, it actually shows the Travis CI, and it'll tell you what happened. And so this will show up as soon as you start doing commit. It'll actually start doing checks against these commits, and you'll commit by commit. It'll review them. There's very virtuous feedback for doing frequent pull reviews or frequent pushes to your personal repo in this model.
Yeah, the trick is going to be how to extend this across the workload repos that we have.
All right, let's add that to the design discussion and keep, as I think these are great. Cool. All right, I want to leave time. We're running out of time. Mike, do you want to? Sorry, I'm excited about CI, which is good. Do you want to talk briefly about the docs publishing?
No, and docs kind of tie into that. So,
okay.
I think high level, I have reasonable success taking the existing Markdown docs and converting to HTML. If people think that's a good idea, I'll move forward and put together a workflow to kind of audit that, and then we can either schedule trigger it off unless there are objections. My intent is to the existing markup for now, keep everything down and do the thing in the processing, and go back later or maybe. But I just want to move quick, get this stuff pushed out on basis so it's always up to date and accessible. I just want people on that.
No, it makes sense. I'd like to see that moving forward. And you did it without having to change it to RST. The last time we talked, you had said we didn't. It might require RST. But
I'm able to do it through an automated version of RST, so I can convert the Markdown to RST, convert the RST through Sphinx. That's working. The glitches I found, I think I can work around by tweaking our existing Markdown. So I don't want to convert all our documents now in repo. I'm kind of doing the conversion on the fly.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And then Mike had sent out a nice email showing some of the Sphinx capabilities.
He sent out a link. I don't even remember what it was, but I just wanted to get some feedback to say, that look right? Is that good enough? Should we just run with it? Once I get the flow debugged, I'd like to trigger it off the CI on a commit.
Makes perfect sense. Yes, and if we had a way, one of the reasons I was interested in RST is to see if it can improve our table rendering.
I'm definitely interested in that. Agile. I want to hit the first thing first, get the docs published. The key issue I'm seeing right now, tables are foobar. I can fix those in the processing. And some of the TOC levels are a little funny because of the way Markdown handles levels. And I'm pretty sure I could deal with that automatically in the conversion.
Okay. Cool.
So are you assuming that the doc conversion will make its way back into the code base, or is this for the external wiki?
This is taking the docs that are in the code base, pushing them out to a website, say github.io or someplace else as HTML, and probably also pushing them out as PDF and EPUB formats since it's almost free. So docs are online, so I want to build directly from the Markdown that's in the existing sources. And then at some point in the future, I want to go back and look at converting the doc format to restructured text, but I don't want to do that right now.
All right, that makes sense.
So it's kind of busy work.
Yeah. So just to confirm, the documents that'll stay inside of the code base will continue to be marked down. What this is a publishing form for web access to the documentation sets.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
This is processing the existing docs, converting them to HTML, adding pretty navigation and whatever we can for indexing and search capability.
All right.
But the docs will stay in the tree.
Okay. Is there a reason why we wouldn't do this in the code base?
So we're kind of doing it in the code base now. GitHub renders the documentation in the repository, and Crowbar actually renders the documentation in the UI if you have OpenCrowbar up and running. Right. The issue is the docs aren't very accessible if you haven't gotten Crowbar up and running yet.
Well, yeah, no, I understand that.
Okay.
My question is in the user interface of the system, does it make more sense to, if we're going to worry about the formatting as we're publishing out to a web, to ensure that the formatting is just appropriate inside of the system and render it as a web page as opposed to Markdown?
I'm trying to think of the right way to answer that. So right now, within the Crowbar code base, we kind of built our own documentation system.
Yeah.
So we're rendering the Markdown into HTML in the UI dynamically. What I'd like to do eventually is get the same processing that publishes those docs to a website integrated into the code base. So I would like to do that, but short term, I think I can pretty quickly get a website built from the code as an independent workflow, and then literally use that same processing stream within the code base to also render the docs. There
Mark,
are some,
I think I'd like to poke at that with you.
Yeah, that's why I was just looking for feedback here. If people think we should just kind of, I guess the executive summary is I'd like to do a brute force conversion to get this stuff accessible on the web, and then kind of go back and revisit the code base and improve the way we actually do the documentation within Crowbar if it's running. I'm not sure if that answers your question, Scott.
It does. That's perfect.
Yeah, because we kind of built our own documentation system, and I think we could replace that. But to do it right now, there's a bunch of fudging that I really don't want to do.
No, I can understand. My main point was is if there's two ways to do something, you tend to get one wrong, always.
Mm-hmm.
So you should make it so that you have one way to render the docs, right? Whether they're being published or whether they're being rendered in the user interface. It's fine to do it in steps. I completely agree with that. But I could just see, the public docs are messed up. Oh no, the UI is messed up, right? And they'll mess each other up if there's a different process to render.
Yeah. So I guess the epic is let's unify that, but short term I'm going to push to the web.
From my experience with the documentation for the Samba project and doing the documentation here, the biggest challenge that we have is identifying an appropriate source code format to store the documentation in that gives us the flexibility to produce output to the appropriate targets.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next challenge is one of, okay, now what tool do we use as the predominant tool to actually edit that code in so that we don't screw ourselves up?
I would agree. So I think the next step here on this is to open an issue and kind of summarize what we're doing potentially on a separate Etherpad, the big picture plan, and then the short-term moves, and then we can review that in the next meeting. Or for that matter, I'll just blitz through and publish what I've done so far.
Cool.
I would say you should, unless somebody disagrees.
I've heard no objection, so.
There's no objection, I agree. However, I would like to poke at this with you, Mike.
Sure. Sure. I was actually debating putting the processing stuff into the tools repo for now.
Yeah, that'd be good.
That would make perfect sense. Yeah, we had some interest in the vagrant pieces, which are also there. It's a different item. All right. In interest of time, we've got 3 minutes. So we don't have time to talk about this. I'll bring it up on Wednesday. We'll add Chef Metal into the design. Actually, I'll probably move it higher into the design meeting.
What would be our goal with messing with Chef Metal at this point?
The goal is to be able to help. It's about trying to bring in the chef community more and take advantage of what they're looking for. So the Chef Metal stuff does not actually do metal. It is really very similar to Crowbar 1. It builds run lists based on a system perspective. That's a very short version. Judd's probably cringing, but and so what they really need is something that handles discovery, boot, and OS and network laydown, so that you can then run Chef against it. And they have a pretty reasonable API for that, or actually they have calls against our API. They use a Chef gem or a Ruby gem to do that. That would integrate pretty well. What I believe is if we do a Chef Metal integration, then the Chef community will be much more interested in investigating what we've built with Crowbar, because it will address a gap in a technology that Chef is promoting quite heavily. And so it's predominantly a marketing. Excuse me. Let me not call it marketing. Community extension work.
Having a reputation of being able to play well with others. The general feeling I get when I'm out talking about Crowbar is that it's a monolithic thing where you got to do everything the Crowbar way, and it just does too much. If we can show a nice, clear integration, that it'll make it easier for people to imagine Crowbar helping them.
And along those lines, go ahead.
Yeah, I can understand that. I think that what I'd like to explore probably in the design meeting is what the technical benefits of doing that are, besides the play well nice bit.
Yeah. We can talk about it, and so let's make that the number one topic. The number one topic of the community meeting. Or the Wednesday meeting. Do people? All right. So we'll get some more information on that and document what the use cases are so that people understand it. We'll talk through. I believe pretty strongly that doing that will expand our community in a useful way. So I'm spending some time over the weekend looking at it. Unless somebody thinks that that's a real waste of time, and if you do, just ping me about it, and we'll talk one-on-one on it. But we'll go through it in some detail next Wednesday, and then I'm going to post the 100-node challenge, which I showed up on the screen just a second ago, and then I think we do need to have a conversation about RPM install maintenance, and what we might want to do is move that. We sort of touched on it, Scott, with your process, but I think we need to actually talk about it at the design meeting. Is that reasonable?
Sure.
Because we have people in the community want to come into Crowbar through the RPM install, and we're just not using it that much. So I want to figure out either we should decommit from doing it, or we should figure out what it's going to take to maintain an updated RPM. Victor, do you know if we're actually generating a new RPM? I don't think we have a build process that does anymore.
We don't do that anymore. We need something running Jenkins or something similar out in the cloud lands that will do that for us.
I don't have a problem after I've reviewed a pull building a new RPM. I've smoked it, taking.
I don't
RPM,
want people to.
Pushing it up.
I don't want people to have to do that. That needs to be a completely automated process. Otherwise, it will inevitably get out of date.
Well, then let's talk about that. I have a system I could easily convert into an automated build system here, and so.
I was just going to stand up a VM somewhere in either the Rackspace Cloud or on Amazon, whose entire job it is to do that.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, that's an option. I mean, Travis theoretically could do it for you as well. It uses Jenkins under the covers.
Well, I mean, yeah, it uses Jenkins under the covers, but I would need to have something that I would trust enough to give my Amazon API keys to do RPM uploads to the S3 Dropbox, or to the S3 bucket that everything lives in.
Right. Understood. Sounds like it's a longer discussion then.
It is a longer discussion. I definitely think we need to get this back. So.
Yeah.
It's not as important as RAID and BIOS configuration through WSMan. So actually, I'm going to go a little bit over if that's right. So I think our top priorities for right now are WSMan, RAID and BIOS, or disk, and it's actually, this is BIOS, iOS, and then it's Mega CLI disk config. Let's see, there's Ready State Wizard and some defects around that. I was trying to. My expectation is I was going to be working on Chef Metal, but if somebody thinks there's a higher function for me to do, obviously finishing Ready State Wizard. Oh, Travis.
Hey guys, I'm going to have to drop off. I look forward to being on the call next week.
No worries. Thanks, Jeff. So I just want to make sure we're on the same page about what we're doing next. Any objections or concerns?
Mega CLI disk config? Why Mega CLI, not WSMan?
If you can do it through WSMan, I was assuming that it was Mega CLI just because we were using the LSI controllers.
Well, I mean, we're using them on the T320s, which, they do all that stuff via WS. You can do all that stuff via WSMan.
Cool. Let's do it.
It's not what can. Yeah, I mean, the lifecycle controller knows how to control the. Yeah, the lifecycle controller knows how to mess with the RAID controller, so we'd be doing that via WS. So we'd be wanting to configure that via WSMan instead of via Mega CLI. I mean, we'll need Mega CLI for when we have to do in-band management, but yeah.
No, I'm perfectly cool with that. That's the right. That's fine. That'll ultimately let us do it before the machines are powered up.
Yeah.
Darn sexy.
Mhm. That's the idea.
I was gonna play with some Go and try to implement something sort of like the Ready State thing, but from the command line, to just give a very basic demonstration of how to use the API.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
I think that would be really cool. Victor.
Because I want to start cutting my teeth on Go anyway.
I mean, a good starting place for that would be to take the current Crowbar command line tool and just do as literal a translation to Go as you can do to begin with. And then,
your Ruby foo totally confuses the hell out of me. I'm gonna start with something really simple.
I do some, yeah. admittedly, I do a fair amount of Ruby meta magic that I really shouldn't have done.
I remember watching you do it. You were glowing a little bit or something.
All right, everybody. I'm going to try and stick within the time frame. Thank you. Clearly, I will try and manage time a little better next time because we have so much to talk about. I want to make sure that we don't off. So, thank you. This is great.
Yeah.
Bye.
See y'all online. Ciao.
All right. See y'all.